So I kind of took a break from doing these for the summer. I've been really busy, went off and raced cars and had lots of fun, did stuff like that, and which kind of falls in line of what LPC has done in the past. I used to take a summer break, so other than jumping in and posting one with the whole Afghanistan situation, I haven't really been doing these for a while, but we're back into wintertime and I want to get back to doing these. I was thinking about it earlier today. I feel a little bit like, if you watch Big Bang Theory, I feel a little bit like Sheldon. You know, we're back with fun with flags. And sometimes I feel like the 12 of you out there watching, maybe I'd do a live call-in show and I'd sit here and watch my phone for an hour. But no, I think there's actually more of you than that. But actually on that note, we're going to start off getting back to this with a series of answering the group of questions that have been asked to me that people either some were posed, one was posed after the Afghanistan thing, and a group of people, I say questions, but this series has, one of them's a question, several of them have been, hey, would you talk about this, or would you talk about this? So that's what we're going to do to start this off. The first one was dealing with the election, which tomorrow is election day. We hardly have election days anymore because they send us everything in the mail, which would be a good topic one time at some point. Maybe I will talk about doing these in the mail. I'll ask my lovely assistant to get out her notes and keeping notes on stuff. But anyway, I want to talk about election day, and if you go back, I've got one where I've done kind of extensively why I think it matters that you vote. So you go, this is an off year election. So there's an off year election that's usually referred to as the one that does not have a presidential election. This would be even more off from that because we have no congressional elections going on right now. And so what I mean by that is there are really no federal elections going on right now. There are a few states who are doing things like electing governors. I've been followed. You might even have a few representatives or something in special elections right now, but we don't have them here, so I haven't been following that. So there is an opportunity basically for an election to come up. I mean, if we really got into it, they can come up anytime your state decides to have an election, but they generally come up every November to some degree, some sort, as long as things make it into the process that actually leads to them ending up on a ballot. Okay? So next year is going to be a big deal election, and we'll talk quite a bit about it going forward, because next year's election stands a reasonable chance to change significantly the power structure federally. Okay? But we talk a lot here about federal intervention, and the federal government is far too involved in our lives. It was never the intention of the Founding Fathers that the federal government would be the primary government involved in your life. The Founding Fathers had the concept that all of the power rested with us, the people. That we, the individuals, hold the power. And because of that, power should reside as close to us as possible. And so we have government in these rings of responsibility. So we have local government, and we think of that as our city or county. In my case, it's county. And sometimes you actually have forms of government closer than that. You, as a member of society, can choose government closer to you than that. So you might have a homeowners association or something like that, which are just forms of government, self-chosen forms of government. You move into a place that has a ring of government that is closer to you than your city or county. And it might include things like water districts or things like that. There's all sorts of forms of government. And I want it to be clear, I am not anti-government, okay? If we're going to live together in society, if we're going to join together as a group of people, we have to have some form of decision-making of how we're going to get along as a group. And that is government. It's just, where should the power come from? So the power, I believe, should be as close to you as is reasonable, and reasonable should be measured the same way individual freedom and liberty is, in that every decision that's made here that does not have to affect the people in the next town over shouldn't be made by us and the next town over. There's no reason for the next town to have any interest or any say in what our decisions are if our decisions don't affect them. So that's where government should be as close to us as possible. So this election involves a bunch of things that are very, very local, which I like. By the way, they're almost always there. They just are not the focus during a presidential election, for instance. Okay? So as you go through, this is a Washington State ballot. I'm assuming most of you are in Washington State, but not necessarily. You might be out there farther than that. And so some of the things that I'm going to say are definitely specific to Washington State. So Washington State has within it these statewide measures, and they are actually advisory votes. It's an interesting thing, this advisory vote thing. This is a very Washington State thing, and it goes back to another thing that is very strong in Washington State. Washington State has one of the strongest track records for using ballot initiatives of any state. And a ballot initiative is put forward by the people themselves. It is not the legislature putting something onto the ballot for us to decide. It's we, the people, putting them on there. And in Washington State, we have this guy named Tim Eyman. Eyman is probably the most hated Washingtonian, as well as in many ways the most loved Washingtonian. I don't agree with him entirely on anything. I would say he has clearly been one of the most influential citizens of the state of Washington over the last 30 plus years. He has mastered the ability to use the initiative system and has had a significant number of initiatives passed. He does not have a perfect track record by any means, but he's gotten a lot of them passed. And the interesting thing is in Washington, which is considered a wildly liberal state, his initiatives tend to run to the conservative side of things, and yet he's been able to get far more of them to pass than you would think possible in this state. One of them was this idea of the advisory vote, and that specifically is triggered in this case when Washington state legislators do something that raises our taxes without us having a chance to directly vote on it. It triggers automatically it to go to a statewide ballot for us to get to say whether or not it should be repealed. It's an interesting thing because it holds no power in law. It does not force the state to repeal something that they've done. So they say, well, then why does it matter? It matters for a couple of reasons. One, it matters because it is a chance for us to say directly back to our legislators, yes, we agree with you, or no, we don't. Okay? It also sets in motion the opportunity for things like ballot initiatives to directly repeal what was put there. Because when it automatically triggers this thing, and we as a state, for instance, say, we would like that to be repealed, it automatically tells a group of people who would choose to go through the process to actually get it repealed, whether or not there's support for it. And the fact that if overwhelmingly we say we want to repeal something, our legislators have now learned that is likely going to lead to an initiative to repeal it, which will pop up to we'll end up repealing it. And so it's a powerful motivator to them either to repeal it themselves, or it's even a more powerful thing when they're legislating to understand we will take back our power and do it ourselves. And Washington State has a very good track record of reaching out and whacking these things down. It's an interesting one, though, because we also have we the people have a bad track record when it comes to the lawyers involved in writing initiatives that end up holding up over time, because the state then sues us and does whatever the hell they want to do. And we often lose on appeal because the people who set the rules as to how an initiative is written is them, and they've set the rules to be very legalistic so that if you don't write it exactly right, it gives the judges the power to whack it down and pull it apart. So it's one of these things. Perhaps we need a ballot initiative that changes how initiatives get written, that gives us more freedom to write initiatives. But it's an interesting one. So there are several of those on here. And then the other things that are on here right now tend to be a lot of local stuff. So we've got hospital districts and school district representatives, which is an interesting discussion to have at some point, because school districts, the people who are sitting on school boards right now are taking a properly timed flogging. They should be. And it's definitely changing who's running for school boards and who will end up on school boards. I'm out in the country, so I also have a fire commissioner position, and etc. The last time I'm going to say on this, and to be clear, I think you should be voting on all these. I think you should be participating in the system, okay? And I think it's important. I think not only is it your right, but I think it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to play a part in the system. And so I think you should vote. The last thing I'm going to say on it is my personal pet peeve on the way local elections happen is the way we define local. We define local only under the basis of where you live. And I think that there should be a choice. I think a business owner who owns a business and has a business incorporated or formed in a location should have the right to participate in the election of the place of their business. So for me, I have a couple of businesses, several businesses, and they're formed in the city of Ellensburg, and yet I have no vote over things like who the city council members are or who the mayor of Ellensburg is. And that affects me in many ways. It affects me in far larger ways than does my county commissioners. My county commissioners, and in many ways, the county commissioner one's interesting because the county commissioners are voted on by everybody who lives in the city because they're also in the county. But the fact that I also participate in the city, I don't get to vote. I don't get a vote there. And so it's one of the things that's difficult about having some of the most important things in my entire life happen within the city, but I have no say in the people who are most responsible for making decisions that might change my zoning, for instance, which I've run into monumental issues with that in the past. Can screw up my entire business, cost me thousands of dollars, hundreds and hundreds of hours facing changing zoning requirements and things like that, and yet I'm not deemed worthy to participate in deciding who those people are. Not entirely not able to participate because I can spend money and I can put up signs and I can do things to help somebody get elected or not elected, but that most basic fundamental right of getting to vote, I don't get to do that. And that's, to me, that's somewhat problematic. I think we could do better in improving the system to say, even if, it would be an interesting one if I were given the opportunity to have to decide, do I want to vote where my business is or do I want to vote where my house is? Might be an interesting thing. I don't know what, I'd have to think about it more to decide what my answer to that is, but to me that's a very interesting question. But tomorrow, most places you have a cutoff date or time, although that's getting blown out the window because if it shows up in the mail sometime in the next 6 months, they can decide, oh, we're going to accept all of those. Those laws are being thrown out the window. But those are topics for another day. For now, there's a vote. Participate.